Welcome to the introductory lecture over plants. We're going to talk specifically about the evolution of plants and how they have adapted to live on land. I'm going to start off with some general characteristics of all plants. Plants are multicellular, so they're made of more than one cell. They are eukaryotic. Remember, all the kingdoms other than archaebacteria and eubacteria are considered eukaryotic, which means they have true nuclei, and they also have membrane-bound organelles. They lack motility, so they do not physically move from place to place. Now, some of them are able to physically, move the flower or move the leaves, but they cannot move from place to place. They are autotrophic, which means they make their own food. They do not ingest to get their energy. They make their own energy through the process of photosynthesis. They have cell walls that are made primarily of cellulose. They can reproduce sexually or asexually. They are able to store excess energy as starch, and they store this in their roots. And then they also serve as a food source for other organisms, and they also give us oxygen to other organisms through the process of photosynthesis. So they're that main source of energy and that main source of oxygen. Now, how has plants evolved over time? This is just a cladogram showing how plants have evolved from their simplest forms. They believe that they originally formed from algae, which, if you remember from our protist lecture, algae is a protist. And from there, they believe that moss came next. Then ferns, seeds started to form. Then you started seeing cone-bearing plants with the pine cones. And we started seeing flowers and flowering plants. Here's another diagram of the evolution of plants over time. They believe they believe that plants came from an ancestral algae, green algae, and then over time they ended up adapting to become land plants and created bryophytes, then pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, which we're going to talk about these different types of plants in another lecture. So what caused them to adapt to survive on land? Because these organisms here all live in the water, and then over time we adapted to have them come on land. So what are those adaptations? So first they have to prevent water loss, because before they lived in the water. And so many plants had to form a waxy cuticle, which is a thick layer that gives them extra protection, like on cactus and aloe vera, so that they didn't lose water. And they also adapted to have stomata, which are these openings in the leaves that open during the day to allow for gas exchange, but then also close at night to conserve water. Another adaptation that they needed were leaves, so that they can absorb and trap light for photosynthesis. That's where the gas exchange occurs. If you remember, most of photosynthesis occurs in the leaf of plants. If you remember what organelle that goes through photosynthesis, that organelle that goes through photosynthesis is the chloroplast. Once again, leaves are the main source of photosynthesis. They have gas exchange occurring so that they can take in that carbon dioxide and release the oxygen through those stomata that we talked about in the first example. And transpiration also occurs through that stomata as well. So what does a typical leaf look like? They'll have this waxy cuticle on the outside, once again to help them keep water in and not lose water. They have an epidermis, which is a layer of cells on the outside. They have guard cells, which are the cells that help open and close the stomata. The stomata is the hole where they allow gas exchange. And then the mesophyll here is the ground tissue that's full of the chloroplasts, where the chloroplasts are to go through photosynthesis, which is the center of the leaf. The third adaptation to survive on land is having specialized roots that can absorb the water and the minerals because they're no longer just floating in the water. They have to be able to go down into the ground to get water. And so with those roots, they can absorb minerals and water. There are different parts of the roots. First, we have root hairs, which is the hairs that come off of the roots that increase surface area so that you can absorb more water. They also have what we call a root cap, which is at the tip of the root that protects it from being damaged. This is what that root cap looks like. So it's like an extra layer of cells here that protects it. There are two different types of root. We have tap roots, which has this large center root that has little projections off of it. And then fibrous roots are the ones that are smaller, going out in all directions. You don't have a main root like in a taproot with the fibrous roots. The fourth adaptation is having specialized stems to transport materials so that you have the ability to transport water and sugars up and down the stems because they're not flat in the water. And then fifth, the ones that reproduce on land need little or no water to occur. And so it's not reproducing in the water, it's reproducing in the air. So some are going to produce seeds in order to reproduce that can go to other areas of land to cause another plant to grow. And some can reproduce using spores, which if you can remember spores from the fungi unit, they can produce spores as well. From here, you guys are going to watch the Plant Structure and Adaptations Amoeba Sisters video to see more structures and adaptations.